Tonight we delve into the darkest corners of the human experience, where the veil between worlds thins, and something ancient, something unspeakable, reaches across. We speak not of fleeting shadows or whispered names, but of a terror far more profound, the insidious invasion of the self, the horrifying reality of a soul displaced. Forget what you think you know about ghosts. Tonight, we explore what happens when they don't just haunt a place, but claim a person. This isn't merely a tale of fear, but a stark, chilling reminder that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. Prepare yourselves. We begin with a chilling account from a secluded town, where the ancient stones of an old house still whisper tales of its first inhabitants. This isn't just about a haunting, it's about a relentless, generational malevolence, a spirit that doesn't just cling to walls, but seeks to possess the very essence of those who dare to dwell within. What happens when a house doesn't just remember, but actively tries to relive its past through you? This is the story of the Albright house, and the young woman who almost lost herself within its decaying embrace. The first instance comes to us from the quiet, almost forgotten town of Blackwood, a place nestled deep within forested hills where old ways die hard and secrets linger in the mist. It was the winter of '98 when Sarah, a young woman fresh out of college, took a temporary job caring for an elderly shut-in, Mrs. Albright. Sarah was eager for the work, needing to save money for graduate school, and the isolation of Blackwood seemed like a small price to pay for the generous stipend Mrs. Albright's distant nephew offered. She saw it as a temporary retreat, a quiet place to study and prepare for her future, a brief pause before diving into the bustling world of academia. But from the moment Sarah stepped across its threshold, a persistent chill seemed to cling to her, an icy tendril that no amount of roaring fire could dispel. The air inside felt heavy, stagnant, carrying the faint, unsettling aroma of dust and decay, mingled with something else, something metallic, like old blood, that she couldn't quite place. It clung to her clothes, her hair, seeping into her very being, a smell that even after scrubbing, she sometimes swore she could still detect on her skin. The Albright house was a relic, a sprawling Victorian manor that sagged with age, its timbers groaning like a weary beast under the constant assault of the elements. Its dark, ornate furniture, draped with yellowing lace, seemed to absorb all light, leaving corners of the rooms perpetually shrouded in shadow, no matter how many lamps Sarah switched on. The wallpaper, peeling in delicate spirals, revealed older, faded patterns beneath, layers of history literally flaking away. Every floorboard had a distinct groan, every window pane a unique rattle in the wind. Sounds that initially seemed charmingly old-fashioned, but soon transformed into a relentless, unnerving symphony. Mrs. Albright herself was a peculiar woman. In her lucid moments, she was frail and surprisingly charming, her conversation peppered with anecdotes from a bygone era. She would reminisce about her youth with a bright, almost youthful sparkle in her eyes, detailing vibrant balls, clandestine rendezvous, and grand garden parties that seemed wildly out of character for the withered figure before her. She would speak of these long-dead acquaintances with such vivid detail, such precise recollection of their voices and mannerisms, as if they were still alive, still part of her immediate world, just waiting in the next room. Sarah found herself drawn into these tales, captivated by the intricate tapestry of a life lived long ago. But then, without warning, the shift would occur. A profound weariness would descend, her voice dropping to a gravelly monotone, uttering fragmented sentences about the shadow in the attic, or the cold eyes that watch from the parlor window. During these episodes, her gaze would drift, unfocused, towards unseen points in the room, her lips moving silently, as if responding to an unheard conversation. Sometimes, she would stare intently at Sarah, her faded blue eyes hardening, a calculating intelligence replacing the gentle confusion. Sarah initially dismissed it as the natural ramblings of an old mind grappling with dementia, a common occurrence in her previous caretaking experiences. But the regularity of these episodes, their increasing intensity, and the sheer malevolence that occasionally flickered in Mrs. Albright's usually gentle gaze began to gnaw at her. It wasn't just a lost mind. It was like looking into a deep, forgotten well and seeing something utterly alien staring back, something that recognized her, that measured her. The house, too, had its own rhythms, a life of its own that defied rational explanation. Doors would sometimes click shut on their own, not softly, but with a deliberate, echoing thud. Floorboards would creak in empty rooms, footsteps pacing slowly, heavily, always just out of sight. And occasionally, Sarah would catch the faint scent of something acrid, like burnt leaves or damp earth, sometimes overlaid with the cloying sweetness of decaying flowers, even when all windows were closed. The old grandfather clock in the hall would strike 13, or sometimes skip an hour entirely, its chimes echoing through the vast, empty corridors with a mournful, mocking finality. She started leaving a small radio playing classical music in Mrs. Albright's room, hoping to soothe the old woman, perhaps subconsciously herself, to fill the oppressive silence with something human. But sometimes, when she'd re-enter the room, the music would be gone, the radio switched off, replaced by a low, almost guttural hum emanating from Mrs. Albright, whose eyes would be fixed on some unseen point above Sarah's shoulder, a faint, eerie smile playing on her lips, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was then that Sarah would feel the temperature in the room plummet several degrees, an unnatural cold that pierced through her heavy cardigan, raising goosebumps on her skin. One particularly stormy night, the rain hammering against the ancient window panes with a furious intensity, the wind howling like a banshee through the eaves, shaking the very foundations of the old house. Sarah was preparing Mrs. Albright for bed. The electricity flickered intermittently, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls, making familiar objects seem grotesque and menacing. Mrs. Albright was unusually agitated, her frail body trembling, not with frailty, but with a strange, almost manic energy. She muttered incessantly under her breath about the hunger and the whispers in the walls that promise warmth, a new host. Her eyes darted around the room, full of a frantic, wild energy. Sarah tried to reassure her, her own nerves frayed by the storm's intensity and the house's unsettling atmosphere, adjusting the blankets, her voice attempting a calm she didn't feel. As she leaned closer, a sudden blinding flash of lightning illuminated the room, and in that stark light, Mrs. Albright's hand shot out, grabbing Sarah's wrist with surprising strength. The grip was cold, unyielding, and Sarah felt a sudden, terrifying jolt, like static electricity coursing through her, but deeper, more invasive, as if something was attempting to draw energy directly from her. It was a draining sensation, a profound cold that seeped into her bones, making her teeth chatter uncontrollably. She could feel her own pulse thudding against that icy grip, a frantic drumbeat against a relentless, ancient cold. "It wants you," Mrs. Albright hissed, her voice no longer frail and reedy, but deep, resonating with an unfamiliar power, a voice that seemed to vibrate in Sarah's very bones, causing a sickening tremor through her body. Her eyes, usually a faded blue, seemed to darken, like obsidian pools reflecting no light, pupils dilating until they consumed the entire iris, twin abysses staring into her soul. It wants to know what it feels like, to live again, to feel the sun, to taste the wind, to breathe, to experience life anew after so long in the cold earth. The pressure on Sarah's wrist increased, causing a dull ache, then a sharp, burning pain that felt like frostbite spreading through her veins. Sarah saw not Mrs. Albright, but a chilling malevolence, an ancient, starved entity peering out from behind those eyes, a creature that had been waiting, patiently, for a new vessel. A profound terror, cold and absolute, enveloped her. Sarah pulled away with a desperate wrench. A primal scream caught in her throat, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She scrambled backwards, stumbling over a rug, her mind racing with incoherent thoughts of escape, of fresh air, of anything that wasn't this oppressive darkness. She fumbled for the light switch, her fingers clumsy with dread, desperate to flood the room with reassuring light, to dispel the growing darkness she felt was pressing in, threatening to consume her. But as she found the switch and desperately flicked it on, she barely registered the chilling laughter that seemed to bubble up from Mrs. Albright's throat, a sound utterly devoid of human warmth, a dry, rasping cackle that promised endless suffering, endless cold. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated evil, a sound that would echo in her nightmares for years to come. The lights flickered on, momentarily banishing the shadows, bathing the room in harsh fluorescent glare, but not the terror. Mrs. Albright was sitting bolt upright in bed, her head still cocked at that unnatural angle, her gaze fixed on Sarah, that unholy grin plastered across her face, a silent accusation, a silent victory. From that night on, Sarah's routine irrevocably changed. Sleep became almost impossible. She confined herself strictly to the brightly lit kitchen after dusk, keeping all the lights on, even in rooms she wasn't using. The silence of the house became her enemy, a canvas for imagined horrors, so she kept a small portable radio tuned to a talk show playing softly, desperate for human voices, for any sound that wasn't the house's own unsettling symphony. Every creak of the house, every groan of the ancient timbers, every distant howl of the wind became amplified, morphing into imagined whispers and rustling footsteps just beyond her periphery. She found herself constantly glancing over her shoulder, convinced that those obsidian eyes were watching her from the darkened hallway, from the shadows behind the kitchen door. She would prepare Mrs. Albright's evening meal, leave it at her bedroom door with an almost ritualistic haste, and retreat, always ensuring the door was firmly shut, the lock bolted, even though she knew it was a futile gesture against what she now believed resided within. She would hear faint sounds from within, a chair scraping, a soft thud, sometimes a low, tuneless humming, but never the old woman's voice, only that occasional, low hum that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, a silent, rhythmic pulse. She ate quickly, her appetite dwindling to nothing more than a nervous habit, the food tasting like ash in her mouth. Then she'd barricade herself in her small, temporary bedroom, pushing a heavy armchair against the door and reinforcing it with anything heavy she could find. Sleep became a mere concept, a fleeting, unreachable comfort, plagued by fragmented images of Mrs. Albright's distorted face, that unholy grin, and the persistent feeling of that cold, powerful grip on her wrist. Each morning, she would approach Mrs. Albright's room with a profound sense of dread, finding the old woman frail and confused once more, almost as if the previous night's terror had never happened. Her eyes a gentle, faded blue, but the memories, the feeling of that cold, ancient entity were burned into Sarah's very being, a phantom chill that never left her. The constant tension began to take its toll. Sarah lost weight. Her skin grew pale, her eyes sunken. She felt perpetually exhausted, yet terrified to close her eyes. She started to experience bizarre occurrences even when Mrs. Albright was seemingly normal. Books would fall from shelves when no one was near. Her reflection in any polished surface seemed slightly off, distorted, eyes that weren't hers staring back. One morning, she found her own hair, a long strand of it, woven into a grotesque knot and tied to the handle of her bedroom door from the outside. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Mrs. Albright could not have done it. The entity was playing with her, taunting her, reminding her of its presence, its power. The final straw came a week before her contract was due to end. She was tidying Mrs. Albright's room, while the old woman was lucid and calmly reading a book. Sarah was relieved, thinking perhaps the episodes had passed. She picked up a small antique silver locket from the bedside table, meaning to polish it. As her fingers brushed the cold metal, a sharp, piercing pain shot through her hand. She cried out, dropping the locket. On the back of her palm, a raised, angry red welt had appeared, a perfect imprint of an ancient, thorny symbol she'd never seen before. Mrs. Albright, from her bed, slowly lowered her book, her eyes, devoid of any warmth, fixed on Sarah's hand. "It marks its own," she whispered, her voice once again deep, resonant, and utterly devoid of Mrs. Albright's usual frailty. "You are not leaving, Sarah. You are merely changing rooms." A primal, instinctual scream tore from Sarah's throat. She grabbed her meager belongings in a frantic haze, not even bothering to properly clean her room or fulfill the remaining days of her contract. She didn't say goodbye to Mrs. Albright, couldn't bring herself to face those eyes again. She threw her bags into her car and drove away, the ancient house receding in her rearview mirror, its dark windows like vacant eyes staring out at the world, following her. A profound sense of relief washed over her, quickly followed by a chilling certainty. She knew, with every fiber of her being, that she had witnessed something truly evil, something that had not only haunted a place, but had devoured a soul and had tried to claim hers. She never looked back, but the image of those black, hungry eyes, the taste of that metallic air, and the lingering phantom itch of that thorny symbol on her palm would forever remain etched into the darkest corners of her memory, a constant reminder of the insidious cold that had once wrapped itself around her, and the entity that still waits within the Albright house, eternally hungry. From the quiet desperation of a Victorian manor, we shift to the vibrant, neon-lit streets of Tokyo, where ancient spirits still walk. This tale explores not just a physical possession, but a spiritual hijacking, an unseen entity twisting a beloved sister's identity into a vessel of ancient grief and vengeance. What happens when the person you know, the person you love, becomes merely a puppet, their eyes reflecting an age-old hatred that was never their own? This is Kenji's heartbreaking struggle to reclaim his sister, Akari, from the grasp of a malevolent presence. Our second account transports us across continents to a bustling city apartment in the heart of Tokyo. Kenji, a diligent university student, had always considered himself a man of logic and reason. His world was one of textbooks, algorithms, and late-night study sessions at the university library. He was pragmatic, focused, and held little stock in superstitions or old wives' tales, especially not the ancient folklore his grandmother would sometimes recount with a solemn look in her eyes. But that world, so neatly ordered and rational, began to unravel when his younger sister, Akari, a vibrant, artistic soul with a passion for traditional Japanese folk art, began to change. It started subtly. Akari, usually meticulous in her appearance, her traditional kimonos always perfectly chosen, her art supplies neatly organized, became increasingly disheveled. Her bright, inquisitive eyes, once sparkling with creativity and curiosity, grew dull, shadowed with a profound exhaustion that sleep never seemed to alleviate. She would spend hours staring blankly at her unfinished canvases, her brushes lying unused beside them, her usual effervescence replaced by a heavy, almost palpable melancholy. The vibrant colors she once favored in her paintings gave way to muted, somber tones, and the delicate strokes of her calligraphy became jagged, almost violent. Then came the mood swings, violent outbursts, uncharacteristic for her gentle, soft-spoken nature, would erupt without warning over trivial matters, shattering the peace of their small apartment. These would be followed by long periods of sullen, vacant silence, where she would sit motionless, sometimes humming a low, tuneless melody that seemed to curdle the air, a sound utterly devoid of joy. She began to speak in a low, rasping voice that wasn't hers, a voice that seemed to grate on the nerves, sometimes in a dialect of Japanese that Kenji didn't recognize, sounding archaic and guttural, like something torn from an ancient scroll. Other times, she would utter fractured sentences in English, despite having only rudimentary knowledge of the language, her pronunciation strangely perfect, almost too perfect, with an unnerving, formal cadence. One evening, Kenji returned from a particularly grueling study session at the university library, mentally exhausted but ready to unwind. He found Akari staring blankly at a wall in their living room, her head cocked at an unnatural angle, as if listening intently to something only she could hear. Her body was rigid, her hands clenched into fists in her lap, her usually serene face contorted into a strange, unsettling expression. He called her name first softly, then louder, a growing sense of dread blossoming in his chest. But she didn't respond, her gaze unwavering, fixed on an unseen point. A prickle of unease ran down his spine. He cautiously approached, and as he gently touched her shoulder, she flinched violently, spinning around to face him with a terrifying speed that defied her usual languor, a speed that was utterly inhuman. Her face was contorted in a sneer, a mask of pure malice that erased any trace of his sister. Her lips were pulled back to reveal teeth that seemed sharper, more predatory than he remembered, and her eyes were like burning embers, filled with an ancient, terrifying hatred a hatred that had festered for centuries. "He doesn't belong here," Akari rasped, her voice a cruel parody of her own, laced with venom. She spoke of Kenji in the third person, as if he were an intruder in his own home, a pest to be dealt with. "He watches. He knows. He interferes. The fool. He thinks he can understand. He thinks he can resist." The words felt heavy in the air, charged with a malevolent energy that made the hairs on Kenji's arms stand on end, sending a shiver of ice through his blood. He stumbled backwards, a knot of pure terror tightening in his stomach, utterly unable to comprehend what was happening to his beloved sister. Kenji, despite his rational mind screaming against it, was horrified. He dragged Akari to their family doctor, then to a renowned psychiatrist. They ran every test imaginable: blood work, brain scans, psychological evaluations, even extensive toxicology screens. But no physical ailment, no discernible mental illness, no known drug could explain the erratic behavior, the bursts of superhuman strength she sometimes displayed, or the chillingly accurate knowledge she occasionally revealed about strangers or distant events she couldn't possibly have known. Intimate details about the psychiatrist's private life, or obscure historical facts that surprised even the academics Kenji later consulted. The doctors attributed it to extreme stress, a rare form of dissociative identity disorder, a psychotic break, anything but the impossible. They prescribed heavy sedatives, which for a time kept it subdued, but never truly gone, merely dormant, waiting for its moment. But Kenji knew. He saw the cold, calculating intelligence in her eyes when it spoke. He felt the tangible weight of another presence in the room, suffocating and malevolent, clinging to Akari like a second skin, slowly consuming her light. He remembered a story his grandmother once told him of a restless spirit, an Onryo, a vengeful ghost trapped by a terrible injustice, forever seeking a vessel, a temporary home to enact its lingering rage upon the living. He remembered Akari's recent obsession with an abandoned, dilapidated shrine nestled deep within a forgotten alleyway near their apartment, a place she had visited often to sketch, drawn to its eerie beauty, to its history. She had found a small, intricately carved wooden doll there, its features crude but unsettling, which she had brought home despite Kenji's unease, claiming it was her muse. Had she brought something back? Had she unwittingly invited something ancient and malevolent into their lives, into their home? The thought was a sickening realization. The manifestations grew bolder, more frequent. Objects would move on their own, often small, personal items belonging to Akari, placed in unsettling configurations. Low, guttural growls would emanate from Akari's room at night, punctuated by the rhythmic thudding of something striking against the wall, a relentless, dull impact. Kenji would find faint, disturbing symbols scratched into the floorboards near Akari's room, symbols he recognized from his grandmother's old texts as wards, but wards inverted, twisted into invitations, into curses. He tried to research, to find answers in ancient folklore, in religious texts, in every obscure book he could find, desperate for a solution, a way to save his sister. He felt a desperate urgency, a cold clock ticking, knowing his sister was slowly being devoured from the inside, her essence fading, her very soul slipping away. He consulted with his grandmother, who, after hearing his account, confirmed his deepest fears, her face etched with profound sorrow. She spoke of a local legend, a woman wronged, betrayed by a lover, and left to die in despair, whose spirit had never found peace, whose rage still simmered, seeking a young, vibrant host to reclaim a stolen life. The climax came during an attempt by Kenji and his parents to seek spiritual intervention. After exhausting all medical avenues, his mother, a devout Buddhist, reached out to a local shaman, a frail woman with eyes that seemed to see too much, eyes that held a profound sorrow. The shaman, accompanied by two silent acolytes, came to the apartment. The air grew thick with incense and the low drone of sutras, the scent of burning herbs mixing with the stagnant air of dread. As the shaman began her purification chants, her voice clear and strong, her movements precise, Akari, who had been heavily sedated for the ritual, began to thrash violently in her bed, her movements unnaturally powerful, tearing at the thick cloth restraints they had applied. She screamed obscenities in multiple languages, her voice a chorus of agonized cries and guttural roars, her body twisting into impossible, grotesque positions, her limbs bending at angles no human body should achieve, her head rotating with a sickening fluidity. The air in the room grew heavy, oppressive, thick with a palpable dread, the scent of ozone stinging Kenji's nostrils, the very walls seeming to press in. The faint hum that had become a constant companion in the apartment grew louder, pulsing with an unnatural energy, like an overloaded transformer about to explode. The small, intricately carved wooden doll Akari had brought from the shrine suddenly flew across the room, striking the wall with a sickening crack, splitting open to reveal a cavity filled with desiccated, dark hair. Akari's eyes, now completely devoid of her own consciousness, pools of burning hatred, locked onto Kenji's. But it wasn't Akari looking back. It was something ancient, filled with a bottomless, seething hate, a creature that had been waiting for centuries, whose patience had finally paid off. "You cannot save her," it snarled through his sister's lips, the sound tearing at Kenji's very soul, echoing in the now silent room, silencing even the showman's chants. She is ours now, her life, her voice, her dreams, all swallowed. And soon, yours too, little brother. All that she was is now ours. All that she desired, we will achieve. A chilling, ethereal laugh erupted from Akari's throat, a sound of pure triumph and malice, a sound that would forever haunt Kenji's deepest nightmares. The shaman, her face pale and contorted with effort, chanted louder, desperately trying to reassert control, to weave protective spells. But the entity was too strong, too deeply rooted. With a final piercing shriek that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the building, shaking the apartment to its core, the shaman collapsed, clutching her head, blood trickling from her nose and ears. Her acolytes fled in terror. The ritual was broken, the protective ward shattered. Akari fell unconscious, her body limp, her breathing shallow, but the air in the room remained heavy, oppressive. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the cacophony, a heavy, suffocating blanket of despair, permeated by the lingering scent of ozone and something rotten, something ancient. They rushed her to the hospital. She recovered physically, but a part of her never truly returned. The fiery artist, the vivacious sister, was gone. She lives now in a quiet, almost catatonic state in a specialized care facility, her eyes still holding that faint, vacant look, her gaze often fixed on unseen objects, sometimes a faint, unsettling smile playing on her lips, a smile that mimics the one Kenji saw on that terrible night. Kenji often visits, sits by her side, his heart heavy with guilt and despair, haunted by the memory of her twisted face and that guttural voice. He talks to her, reads to her, plays her favorite music, desperately hoping for a flicker of recognition, a sign that his sister is still there, trapped somewhere within her own mind, fighting to break free. And sometimes, just sometimes, he sees a flicker of the old Akari in her gaze, a momentary spark of recognition, a tear that rolls down her cheek, but then it's gone, replaced by an unsettling emptiness, a profound stillness. And he knows, with a soul-crushing certainty, that the apartment and his sister are still not entirely their own. He sometimes wakes in the night, certain he hears that faint, mechanical hum from Akari's room, that distant clang of bells, a chilling reminder that some things, once opened, can never truly be closed, and that some echoes linger long after the initial scream. Our final chilling narrative brings us into the modern age, where ancient malevolence finds a new, terrifying playground, the digital world. This is not a haunting of a house or a person in the traditional sense, but an insidious infiltration of identity, a spectral entity that exploits the very technology meant to connect us. What happens when a spirit, driven by centuries-old vengeance, learns to manipulate the internet and turns your digital footprint into its own terrifying resurrection? This is the story of Liam, a man who bought a mirror and, in doing so, invited an 18th century demon into the 21st century. Finally, we arrive at the most recent and perhaps the most insidious tale of possession, a haunting that unfolded not in a creaking old house or an ancient shrine, but within the confines of modern technology, shared across the digital ether. Our protagonist, or rather, our victim, is Liam, a young man in his late 20s who, like many, found solace and connection online. He was a brilliant software engineer by day, designing intricate algorithms and cybersecurity protocols, a man of logic and code. But by night, he was a passionate collector of antique oddities, spending countless hours scouring obscure forums and digital auction houses for unique historical artifacts, drawn to their untold stories. One day, while deep in the rabbit hole of a particularly shadowy forum known for dealing in curiosities, rare finds, and items of questionable provenance, he stumbled upon an old, ornate mirror for sale. The seller was vague, offering it at an impossibly low price, mentioning only that it had a history, perhaps a rather long and inconvenient one, and that it had a tendency to reflect more than just the present. Liam, intrigued by the mystery and the irresistible bargain, purchased it, dismissing the ominous undertones as mere marketing flair, a clever sales tactic. The mirror arrived a week later, surprisingly heavy and intricately carved with grotesque gargoyles and swirling, unintelligible symbols that seemed to writhe and shift under casual observation. Its silvered surface was cloudy with age, like an ancient lake shrouded in mist, reflecting only distorted, ghostly images, as if looking through a warped lens. Liam, captivated by its eerie beauty and the tangible sense of history it exuded, placed it prominently in his bedroom, admiring its dark aesthetic, positioning it to catch the morning light. Almost immediately, his cutting-edge laptop, always reliable, a machine he had custom-built for peak performance, began to malfunction. Files corrupted themselves without explanation. Vital system processes would crash, and strange archaic messages in a peculiar, almost runic script would flash across his screen for a split second, too fast to capture, too disturbing to ignore. And his webcam, even when supposedly off and covered with a physical slider, would sometimes flicker, showing a fleeting, distorted image of his own reflection from the mirror, its surface swirling like disturbed water, revealing shapes and shadows that were definitely not his own. He initially dismissed it as a software glitch, a virus, or perhaps an electromagnetic interference, the symptoms of an old house with unreliable wiring. He ran extensive diagnostics, multiple antivirus scans, even completely wiped and reinstalled his operating system, but the anomalies persisted, growing more frequent and more unsettling, always linked to the presence of the mirror. But then, things escalated beyond mere digital interference. Liam began to experience vivid, unsettling dreams. Not nightmares in the traditional sense, filled with monsters or jump scares, but dreams where he was another person entirely, living another life, filled with intense emotions of rage, sorrow, betrayal, and a burning desire for revenge that were profoundly not his own. He would see through another's eyes, feel through another's skin, hear voices calling a different name, whispers of a life centuries ago. He would wake exhausted, drenched in a cold sweat, his bedsheets tangled, the air around him thick with a metallic tang, as if vast amounts of static electricity had been discharged, leaving a lingering ozone smell. He started losing track of time, finding himself in different rooms of his apartment with no memory of how he got there, or how hours had passed without his conscious awareness. His colleagues at work noticed his increasing forgetfulness, his sudden blank stares during meetings, his difficulty concentrating, and the prominent dark circles under his eyes, which seemed to grow darker each day. His friends noted a subtle shift in his personality, a growing aloofness, a bitterness that wasn't Liam. One evening, he was chatting with friends online, laughing, joking about a new video game release, feeling a rare moment of normalcy. He stepped away from his computer for a moment to get a drink from the kitchen, a quick, routine break. When he returned, his friends were gone, their chat window closed. In its place was an open text document, filled with a chilling, coherent message he had absolutely no recollection of typing. It was a lengthy, furious diatribe, a confession of an ancient wrong, a betrayal, a vow of vengeance for a wrongful death that had occurred centuries ago. The language was formal, almost poetic, but steeped in a cold fury and a palpable sense of injustice. It was signed with a name he didn't recognize, a name that felt cold and heavy on his tongue, a name that seemed to whisper itself into his mind with a malevolent insistence: Elias Thorne. Liam panicked. The logical part of his mind wrestled with the impossible, fighting against the encroaching dread. He immediately began to research Elias Thorne, using every search engine and historical archive he could access, desperate to find an explanation, a rational grounding. What he found sent a shiver down his spine that went far beyond mere fear into the realm of existential dread. Thorne was a minor historical figure, a reclusive and bitter man from the 18th century, a scholar of dark arts, known for his dabbling in forbidden rituals and his violent, unjust death at the hands of a superstitious mob who accused him of witchcraft and demonic pacts. And, chillingly, Thorne had indeed owned an intricately carved mirror, rumored in local legends to be imbued with his malevolent spirit, a final trap for anyone foolish enough to gaze upon its depth, a portal for his return. The details in the online confession matched historical accounts of Thorne's grievances perfectly, detailing betrayals and injustices that only a direct witness could know. Liam's blood ran cold. The digital intrusions worsened, morphing into a full-blown assault on Liam's digital identity, his very existence in the modern world. His social media accounts were hacked, not for financial gain, but to post cryptic, disturbing messages in Thorne's archaic language. Messages that seemed to be direct threats, personal vendettas against historical figures long dead, or chilling prophecies of impending doom for those Liam knew. His emails, instead of client updates or personal correspondence, contained disturbing historical documents, or direct, accusatory messages seemingly from Thorne himself, addressed to people who had lived centuries ago, demanding recompense for long-forgotten slights. His friends grew distant, disturbed by his increasingly erratic online behavior and his increasingly gaunt, haunted appearance. They would ask him about the strange messages, about the posts, and he would stare blankly, genuinely confused, often finding them deleted by the time he checked, as if the entity was aware of his attempts to fight back. Liam felt himself slipping, his own thoughts becoming muddled with another's, a constant, buzzing static in his mind, like two radio stations playing at once, vying for control. He would catch himself thinking things he knew weren't his, feeling emotions that were utterly alien, a simmering rage, an ancient sorrow, a profound sense of entitlement and victimhood that echoed Thorne's historical bitterness. He found himself drafting complex lines of code, creating algorithms he didn't remember designing, algorithms that seemed to be searching for something, building something. He would catch himself speaking aloud in an unfamiliar accent, arguing with invisible interlocutors, only to snap out of it with a gasp, his mouth dry, his heart pounding. He tried desperately to get rid of the mirror. He wrapped it in old cloths, locked it in a cupboard, even tried to sell it online, listing it discreetly on a specialized antique site, hoping to offload the cursed object. But every attempt was met with intense digital backlash. His accounts would be locked, his devices would crash into an unrecoverable state, forcing him to buy new ones, wasting precious funds. Once, while trying to delete the listing, a terrifying, distorted image of Thorne's gaunt, sneering face, its eyes burning with malevolence, flashed across all his screens simultaneously, accompanied by a deafening, unearthly shriek that vibrated through the very floorboards, shaking the entire apartment to its foundations. The mirror itself, wrapped and locked away in the darkest corner of his closet, would sometimes emit a low, resonant hum, a pulse that Liam could feel in his teeth, a silent promise of perpetual presence, a reminder that it was always there, always watching. Liam knew then that he was truly trapped. Elias Thorne wasn't just haunting the mirror. He was attempting to cross through it, using the mirror as a focal point, a gateway, and Liam's digital presence, his very identity, as a bridge to re-enter the world and exact his long-overdue revenge. The entity was clever, insidious, adapting to the modern world, using the digital realm as its new hunting ground, a network through which to extend its influence. It wasn't just possessing Liam, but his entire digital existence. The last communication Liam had with his remaining concerned friend, Sarah, the same Sarah from our first story, now a victim of circumstance, drawn into his digital despair, was a garbled video call. In it, Liam's face was pale, his eyes wide and unfocused, shadowed with a profound weariness that spoke of endless battles fought within his own mind. But beneath his skin, something shifted, a subtle, almost imperceptible twitch, a tightening of the jaw, a slight change in the set of his mouth that made him look utterly foreign. And when he spoke, his voice was layered, two distinct tones warring for dominance, Liam's own faint tremor of fear and exhaustion, and a deeper, colder resonance, uttering words that weren't his, words about returning, about claiming what was lost, about settling ancient scores. "The time has come," the voice rasped, a dry, malevolent hiss that scraped across the microphone, "for Elias Thorne to walk among the living once more. And he walks in a new skin, a new kingdom, the digital kingdom. All that was taken shall be reclaimed. All who wronged me shall know true despair." Then, mid-sentence, the connection dropped. The screen went black, fizzing with static before dying completely. No one has heard from Liam since. His apartment was found empty, the mirror gone. His online presence has vanished entirely, all accounts deleted, all digital traces erased, as if he had never existed. But sometimes, in the darkest corners of the web, in forgotten forums and encrypted chat rooms, an old account will suddenly become active, posting cryptic messages about retribution, about an ancient wrong, about the coming reckoning, about the flaws in modern cybersecurity, signed simply Elias Thorne. And a new listing might mysteriously appear on an obscure auction site for an antique, ornate mirror offered at an impossibly low price, with a vague mention that it has a history, a rather extensive and hungry one, and a tendency to connect in unexpected ways. Be careful if you find it listed in your feed. Be very, very careful what you click on. These tales serve as a chilling testament to the power of the unseen, a stark reminder that some entities seek more than just attention. They seek dominion. The world is filled with shadows, and some of them are not content to merely watch from the periphery. They hunger for a return, for a life they lost, and they will claim any vessel, any soul that is vulnerable enough to be taken, whether that vessel is flesh and bone or electric current and code. Be careful what you invite into your home, what you engage with, and what stories you delve into. For sometimes, the line between observer and participant can blur, and the terror you seek to understand may just decide to understand you from the inside out forever.